Today's session is going to be around disability management and returning to work for employees off on mental health or stress leave that may involve different types of accommodations that a broken arm or a strained back might include. The addition of physical injury may also impact a worker's mental health while they're off, and returning to work can create new anxieties. So in today's session, our panelists will talk about these types of accommodations, strategies, and pathways available to support workers' successful return to work after a mental health or stress leave, and some key considerations in managing mental health related impacts of physical injuries, illness on workers as they return to work. So before we begin, I'd like to thank, first of all, our sponsors that bring us this webinar today. TextMed Services Inc. and WorkSafe BC. And we're grateful for their support in helping us make these webinars accessible to all members and beyond. So let's get started with our panelists today. Today we have joining us from WorkSafe BC's Return to Work Services Consultation Education Services, Teresa Chung. Jennifer Irwin from the Mental Health and Psychological Safety Group at WorkSafe's Prevention Programs and Services. Amanda Peck, who joins us again from TextMed Services, a company specialized in helping simplify disability claims management and everything around it for employers. And our own special person, Dr. Steve Conway, who is our Director of Leadership and Psychological Safety for the Manufacturing Safety Alliance of BC. So welcome, our panelists. Thank you for joining us, taking time out of your day and to share your knowledge and insights and support that is available for employees, employers, as they navigate these, what can be very stressful times. And so maybe I can turn this over to you guys just for a few minutes and start with a quick round of introductions and maybe just take a moment to just introduce yourselves personally. So starting with Teresa, maybe from WorkSafe, Return to Work Programs, go ahead.
Hello, everyone. My name is Teresa Chung. I'm Client Service Manager at WorkSafe BC. I started my career here in 2018 as a vocational rehabilitation consultant working with workers, and now I work with employers and helping them to improve their disability management programs. And that includes being compliant with the new legislation, the return to work obligations under Bill 41. Thank you so much for having me today. I'm looking forward to the conversation.
Great. Maybe we'll go Jennifer from WorkSafe as well.
Thank you and good morning. Yes, thank you so much for inviting me here today. I'm looking forward to the big discussion. We have lots of good questions if nobody asks us anything. So I'm coming from the Prevention Programs and Services group. So I am the industry and program specialist for psychological health and safety, and I have been a safety professional almost 20 years for large organizations and heavy industry like road building and container terminals, and most recently municipal government. So I'm also a registered professional counselor. So psychological health and safety in the workplace is a big passion of mine. I'm a bit of a nerd about it. So I'm very happy to be here today to talk a little bit about that.
Excellent. Thanks again, Jennifer. Amanda.
Hey, so I'm Amanda. I am a claims team lead here at TextMed. We are one of the largest employer representatives, so we provide employer support on both occupational and non-occupational disability to a wide variety of industries across Canada. And yeah, I'm super excited to be back. I think this was a conversation that has started on prior webinars, and we just never have enough time to get to everything. So it'll be great today to kind of expand on some of those things.
Great. Thanks for joining us again, Amanda. And over to Dr. Conway. Steve.
All right. Well, nice to be here. Good to see everybody. I guess I feel really old. I've been doing work around this since the early 90s. And I've worked in a lot of different settings around helping individual groups and organizations make change. In my current role as a director of leadership and psychological safety with the Alliance, I work with members to help promote mental health awareness, to promote healthy, safe, respectful cultures, and importantly, to train leaders on how to lead from a relational viewpoint to promote that employee well-being.
That's great, Steve. And that's a webinar in itself. I think, as we look at the changing landscape of our workforces, it's a really big conversation to be had and being able to teach and provide that guidance. So thanks all of you for joining us today. I know we've got a lot to cover, so I want to get right into some questions that we've already got prepared. And I'm kind of going to jump around randomly just to kind of keep my panelists on their toes, but also may also be looking at digging out some nuggets here as we go along. So maybe I'll start first of all with Teresa. As an employer, when can they reach out and contact a worker who is away on mental health or psychological leave? And this is a big one, right? Because, we've always felt this privacy wall, right? We don't want to bug them, right? But I think there's a real question mark here, and I leave this with you to fill in.
Thank you so much, Wayne. It is a huge question mark. We find that a lot of employers really care about their workers and they don't want to make anything worse. That's what we get from a lot of employers. They don't want to trigger anyone or make something worse or ask the wrong questions. But coming from legislation, let's start there, the return to work obligations under Bill 41, we have to reach out to people at the first moment practicable, which means, and the only time that that doesn't apply is when it is harmful to do so. So with mental health injuries, you want to, first of all, look at what happened. You have some simple mental health injuries and then you have some very extreme ones. So you have to kind of gauge where you are, if there was something super traumatic or someone needs to have a healthcare visit, but reach out to the worker when you can. As soon as you can. And it doesn't have to be a conversation on, hey, when are you coming back to work? It can be a hi, how are you? Something horrific happened to you and we want to support you, however we can support you. For a lot of workers, their job is part of their identity. So it actually helps them to be able to return as soon as possible. So you reaching out and letting them know that they still have a position there, that you're still thinking about them, that you want them to come back can be very helpful. And you can then set a time or appointment to get into deeper conversations about work later. But as soon as you can, you should be reaching out to a worker who has a mental health injury.
Can I expand on that? When we set up obviously employee orientations and we're talking a little bit about, obviously, you're going through your safety orientation. Is this a question that you might want to pose to them as what is the best way to reach you? Is it on this phone? Is it via,
Yes.
setting kind of the stage ahead of time that if something was to ever happen, right? We always have that emergency contact, but I think we kind of just fill in those blanks, kind of not thinking that should something ever really happen,
Yeah.
is this the right place to call or the right person to call?
That's absolutely, Wayne. I'm so glad you brought that up. A lot of times it's we don't know what to do because we haven't established it. If you do not set your culture for disabilities and what happens in the process of a disability, someone else will, and it'll probably be the person you don't want to set the culture. So you want to let people know as soon as they come in, if you are injured, whether it is physical, whether psychological, these are the steps. Expect a call from this person. This is what we're going to talk about. This is what's going to be discussed. So when you reach out to them, they're not surprised. You've already paved the way for yourself to have an easy conversation, or easier. And every side has their expectations set. So they know that when something happens, regardless of what it is, someone is reaching out to me. So they're not going to be surprised to get a call.
Yeah, and I think, further to that, as we see that the diversity in the workplaces, especially with manufacturing, we see that we've got a lot of different cultures, a lot of people from different parts of the world that have come here. Again, I would just really, kind of dig at you a bit on, language, cultural things, because again, are they really understanding what we're asking or what we're telling them? Is there any kind of guidance you can give on that?
Well, yes, that's a very important question because we are a very diverse province, and we're very proud of that. So you have people from basic places. Just remember when you're working with people, you're dealing with people. A lot of us have mental health things that are going on. We just don't wear the label. So this person may have had things going on that you didn't know about, but you still were able to say good morning. You were still able to talk to them. Whatever your mode of conversation was with them while they were working is the same mode you should be before. So if you were every day saying, good morning, Teresa, how are you? How's your family? When you call me after injury, you're going to say, hi, Teresa, how are you? How are things with your family? You know, we're not going to make it different. We're not going to make it awkward. We're just calling to see how they are and where they are right then. And that'll help guide your conversations as to when you're going to bring up the issue of work and when you're going to talk about going back. And you can even allow them, you know, I don't know where you are in your treatment. I don't know exactly how much time you need, but if you could give me an idea of how much time do you think you need, or if you need a week or two off, or if you want to talk about this later, that's fine. I was thinking maybe next week on Friday, we could set aside an hour and have the discussion. But you just want to kind of guide with empathy and deal with the person the way you always have. With mental health, we kind of stigmatize it and make it something that's, oh, well, now that I know, now I have to walk on eggshells. No, you're still going to treat the person the way you always did, with kindness and with respect. And kindness and respect goes across cultures, goes across generations. We all understand kindness and respect, even if you're not using the perfect wording. When you're saying, hey, I don't know what to say. I know you went through something terrible. Please tell me how I can help you. You can be completely vulnerable as well and ask that person what you can do to help.
Yeah, I think your last statement is great. It's not a transaction. It's empathy. We're leading with
Mhm.
empathy, trying to gather information. The next question I had for you, you've kind of answered it, but maybe we can kind of dig out a few more nuggets there around what are reasonable topics to discuss. I mean, again, if somebody's dealing with, a mental health, I mean, obviously we want to be sensitive on the questions we ask. And
Mhm.
so maybe is there some guidance that you can give our listeners today on that?
Sure, absolutely. And you want to think of mental health like you would with any injury. You're not entitled to a diagnosis. You know, you're not entitled to, those types of questions shouldn't be asked, whether it's a physical injury or a mental health injury. But you want to ask them, one, after you find out how they are and make the conversation less awkward, you want to just ask, how are you feeling right now? Can you tell me what parts of your job would be difficult for you to manage? Is there a job at our location that you feel like would be easier for you to manage? What about it makes it easier? What about your job makes it harder? What is it that we could provide for you that would help and assist you with coming back, to work, just so that I can get an idea? There's a resource that we have. It's called How to Support Workers Who Experience Psychological Injuries. Because if my leg hurts, I need to sit down. But sometimes if someone is experiencing a mental health injury, sometimes you don't know what to suggest. Currently, our return to work specialists at WorkSafe BC use this resource, and it's available to you as well to help guide some of that conversation. So if you know kind of in a ballpark what they may have experienced, or if they start saying things like being around people are difficult, it gives you a list of maybe accommodations that would be helpful. So between the two tools, the tool that we offer there and just asking a person how they are and asking them to tell you, then we can usually come up with some type of solution or maybe some type of accommodations. And maybe you can't. Maybe it's going to take a little time, but at least you'll have an idea of where they are.
Yeah, that's some really good information there. And I think, again, safety folks, HR folks, thinking this through, it may not be a matter of if, it's a matter of when it happens, and having some of this, thought through and the training around it, and also setting the expectations with the workers when they join through orientation, and also not just doing it once, you should revise this and kind of remind people as they go along. So that's great. Jennifer, I know that this is a real strong area of you, and I'm curious, what can supervisors and managers do to express care and concern for a worker, but are concerned that they may not ask the right questions? I mean, it's always this thing of, what can I ask? How do I help? Or maybe some people are lack that empathy, and maybe it's like, hey, you're here to work,
Yeah.
right? So how do we kind of bridge those two types of individuals at the workplace?
Yeah, thank you. Good question. And Teresa really did touch on it a lot already with the if you have a way of interacting with the person before they've gone off, that doesn't need to change. If you are able to express care and concern from a genuine place that is yours, rather than, you know, reading off a like a formula of a conversation. If you can really just say, you know, I'm concerned about how you're doing. We haven't talked in a few days. I just wanted to reach out. Those kinds of things you're never, to echo Teresa, you're really never going to go wrong. Reaching out to say, hello, how are you? What do you need? What can we support you with? I come from a prevention lens. So when we think about what is difficult or uncomfortable in those conversations, I then want to spin it and look at like, well, what can we do to set the supervisor or manager up for success? And that's developing that sensitivity or that awareness in conversation. And there is training out there. There is, you know, finding a mentor who you think has made you feel really supported or cared for in a moment where you needed it. How do you emulate that experience towards a worker? So we have a strategy here at mental health strategy here at WorkSafe BC that has 3 principles, and one of them is developing supportive leadership, so supervisors and managers. So that's the lens that I'm flipping that question to, is, you know, what can we do before anyone has the need to take a little time out or bend a knee there, to make sure your culture of your supervisors and your leaders have the capacity or the sort of the comfort in being able to have those conversations.
That's great. I mean, in my 25 plus years in manufacturing, you know, it was always one of those things where, you know, I had an expectation that the workers would kind of leave that part of their life at the door, come in, just, you know, heads down, let's go. We got production to
Right.
do, right? And, you know, here we are 25, 30 years later, and we're talking about empathy, and we're talking about, you know, training the softer skill set to
Yeah.
recognize this. Is there is there any direction you can kind of lead leaders, supervisors in where, you know, we really can, you know, really give them maybe some tools or lead them to where some of those tools might be, to develop those softer skills?
Yeah. It's a medium difficult question to
I
answer
know,
from a
it's a tough one.
WorkSafe BC
Sure.
position, because I don't want to name a set of training from one place or another. However, there is
Yeah.
some very strong organizations out there, such as Canadian Mental Health Association, the Mental Health Commission of Canada, Guardian Minds at Work. I wish I could like list them all to give equal credit,
Yeah.
but there are some really excellent organizations out there. What I will say is, in my experience in heavy industry, I actually had not to call you out, Wayne, but I had a different experience where people would come to my office to talk about a safety issue, and then it turned into, my kid didn't come home last night and I'm
Right.
worried, or I had a fight with my spouse and I don't know what I'm going to do with this relationship. And it became the squishy stuff, less about the physical safety issues.
Yeah.
And so where I was trying to make an impact before I left my previous employment was with emotional intelligence and being able to understand what your feelings are, help you be empathetic to others when they're experiencing their feelings. So you don't necessarily need to feel what they're feeling, but know how to validate or acknowledge their experience and what they're feeling. And so if the audience was looking like, how do I look for that soft skill, or how do I look for what I could do training in, I think emotional intelligence is a nice foundational step. And I would look to, yeah, Steve's nodding, so I was gonna say, I was gonna look to Steve to see if he concurs, but yeah, there's some very strong programs out there. It's not a difficult Google anymore.
Yeah.
Trying to be like political WorkSafe rep, sorry.
No, and I appreciate you outlining that, because there are a lot of great resources. You know, I sit on the board. I'm the board president for CMHA.
Yeah.
I know there's lots. I mean, you know, so much, but guiding employers and guiding managers on, you know, areas where they can. And I know I'm going to dig with Steve a little bit on emotional intelligence training, because it is an important skill set to learn so that we can, you know, support supervisors, managers, as well as workers in that, that kind of area.
Even increasing your own self-awareness of what your emotions are while you're having a challenging conversation can help diffuse the ickiness, or I feel I'm worried I'm going to say the wrong thing. Like if you are already acknowledging that you're concerned about how you're showing up or embarrassed or feel like you said the wrong thing, if you have your own personal awareness, you're already winning in that conversation. And as long as you continue to put the workers' needs first and express your care and concern, the conversation really likely won't go wrong.
Yeah, keeping on this theme just for a bit more, and I'm going to flip over to a different direction with Amanda in a second. But Steve, maybe from your perspective, I mean, again, what do employers like? Employers, they need to be more aware, right? We know this, and build their culture and psychological workplace awareness, right? Those issues that are there. How can we help them get there?
Mm-hmm. I mean, I think, and again, a really important question, and the approach that I think really works is to first of all understand that most people, when they become leaders, when they're promoted into a leadership role, they're promoted into that role because they have the technical ability.
Mm.
They know how to do that specific job. And then as anybody who's, kind of been promoted to a leadership role, you kind of show up for work as that people leader. And the shock of your life is, oh my goodness, now I've got to work with people in a way that I've never had to do before. And so, I think kind of understanding that a lot of people, I think people, the good thing about emotional intelligence is a capacity that almost everybody has in some degree or shape or form. You wouldn't be able to show up in the world and function if you didn't have it. But the competencies are also something that can be trained, right? That's what I like about emotional intelligence. It's a skill set. And if you're not as strong, if you put in the time and the effort, you actually can increase, your ability. And people call them soft skills. Sometimes people don't like the idea of soft skills. I don't have a problem with that terminology personally. I mean, but really we're talking about these relational skills and how do we develop them? Again, I think as, Jennifer, you mentioned, it's important to understand how you're feeling, but emotional intelligence is that awareness of how I'm feeling, how emotions drive my behavior, my decisions, understanding how it drives other people's emotions and like how it drives their behavior, and learning how to work with that in a way that drives kind of performance or positive outcomes in a way where people actually want to follow you, right? With emotional intelligence, people are following you because they want to, not because they're forced to. And we just see far better outcomes. The links between leaders with strong emotional intelligence competencies and worker mental health and well-being, they're indisputable. But it's a skill that can be trained. So I'm a big believer, hey, let's call people in, let's invite them in rather than call them out. If you don't have it, it's okay. You can learn it.
Yeah, and that's a great point, Steve. And I think there's going to be more of an emphasis on this because one of the things that we're noticing is that we've got a lot of, younger, HR folks and newer, younger managers, and they don't have the necessary experience. We got a lot of experienced people leaving the workforce, and so they aren't getting that same coaching. And so companies investing in their teams and having these coaching moments to kind of give them those transformative skills really will help them along the way because again, it's a huge resource of ours. It's not easy to find good employees, and so we really want to keep them happy and healthy and functioning in our workplace, right? So it is an important part of what we do. I'm going to switch gears a bit here. I'm going to go to Amanda, and from TextMed, helping employers, and kind of working to really guide them through these times where workers are off. What can employers do to support the workers' return to work from a mental health kind of perspective? I mean, because we're seeing more of it. Obviously, we
Mhm.
didn't really see as many of these claims in the past. We're seeing a lot more of them going forward. And so I think this is an area that many employers are struggling understanding what they can do.
Yeah, and I don't know that it is such a topic change. It's kind of building on what Teresa, Jennifer, and Steve have kind of touched on in a way, because ideally you're going to want to put those things in place proactively, right? So you're starting with company policies, pulling out all those old dusty policies, making sure they align with the culture and the environment you want to create, right? Things like having open door policies, or taking a look at your benefits and making sure you have an EAP program, or maybe some webinars, or staff education, supervisor education. Like those are all proactive things that are going to set you up for that success when you do have a mental health issue come up, a mental health claim, or whether it's occupational or non-occupational, it just kind of sets the stage for that. I think another big thing is it's great to do all those things, but educating your staff and workers on it before it happens so that they know what the reporting process is, they know what benefits are available to them, they know who they can go talk to, who might be reaching out to them if something does happen, and then educating the supervisors on how we're going to communicate with our workers, especially if they're dealing with mental health, right? Like those are such key components of just, I think, getting that foundation there. But they can lead to huge successes in the program. Another thing is when it does happen, setting those expectations, just because you've done the coaching and the education, um, setting those clear expectations and having just a frank and open kind of conversation. So like Teresa mentioned, you're reaching out to them and, hi, how are you? I'm just concerned for you. But a lot of employers are very, I guess, maybe scared to say, hey, here are my expectations, what are your expectations, or when can I call you next? Those things lay that groundwork for the communication going forward and for the recovery process. So asking the weird questions like, are you okay with phone calls? Are you okay if I'm your main contact person? A lot of times you see where maybe somebody's just not comfortable with the HR person or somebody who's reaching out to them, and once that gets switched, it's a totally different ball game. So, it's supposed to be, and the whole Bill 41, and I know we're touching on that here, but it's supposed to be a more collaborative process. So if you have a disability management advisor like us, you can lean on us. We can help facilitate that. If you don't, WCB, or when those conversations go sideways or it's maybe not going the way you want it to go, that's where you can lean on the mental health support services and say, hey, like, can you tell me if this is harmful? Should I still be connecting with them? I can see that question's already popping up in the chat, and it's like, what do I do if maybe they're not responding? So all of those things, and just kind of mapping that out, I think, before you're crossing those bridges makes it a lot easier. And then everybody's a little more comfortable when they're dealing with it in the heat of the moment and concern for what's going on.
There's a lot of great points there, and it does cross right into this whole Bill 41 conversation,
Yeah.
right? And I think um, setting out, kind of those discussions in advance, because I think workers, around education, going back in some of your annual team discussions, kind of talking about ways in which you're going to communicate with them, things that have changed, even doing a little bit of training around this is I think just critical for organizations to have success in that. And I'm going to dig a little bit more, like what are some of the um, the indicate things that or indicators that employers and workers um, n- understanding really what is suitable, I guess is what I'm looking at. Like, how do we know what is a suitable return to work, you know, um, program? I mean, workers are going to be kind of like, well, I don't know, right? And you
Yeah.
as an employer is trying to figure that out because you want to get them back to work, because we know the success
Yep.
of a worker's, recovery is by, really getting back to work at a reasonable time and getting reintegrated into the work. So what can employers do here?
Yeah, and I mean, the first thing is like there's no rule book, right? Like workplaces are so unique, workers are so unique. The type of mental health issue they might be experiencing is so unique that it's the biggest thing I probably preach in all these webinars we do is just being flexible, keeping an open mind, because it's really going to change depending on the circumstances, the worker, where they're at in their recovery. So the second you start making kind of, I think, hard rules about what that could look like, or what's reasonable, it really limits yourself in your ability to accommodate a worker. So when we're looking at a return to work on like a mental health claim, it's not quite as easy. So I think employers do struggle with it. If somebody hurts their arm, it's very easy to say, okay, they can do that task. If
Yeah.
somebody's dealing with mental health, it's a lot harder. But the first step again is going to be communication, right? So we want to be talking to the worker, getting a feel for what might make them uncomfortable in the workplace, what they're struggling with, what their abilities are. You know, it's great if we have that clear medical, but I think especially in our healthcare system right now, that's not always immediately available. Unfortunately, that medical, you know, expertise to kind of guide you. So your next best step is to talk to the person, see what's going on, see what their concerns are, you know, what they've been advised, and then looking at making modifications based on their cognitive ability. So we're looking at things like making changes to their work environment. Maybe we're looking at modifying their work hours, exposure to the public, exposure to other coworkers, looking at job demands. And a lot of that information is stuff you can gather directly from the worker, right? In a conversation. Hey, are you okay with your current, you know, set of tasks? Do we need to maybe remove some of these meetings that are going on? If you're coming back, are you okay working full hours? It's just getting that conversation going is really going to very quickly, I think, identify for a lot of employers what the big barriers are they need to address in that specific case. And it's not that you might have the answer immediately, but once they're identified, at least you can start working towards those and considering things that might facilitate that return to work.
Yeah, I think, one of these things is, we're going to get stuck at some point, right?
Mhm.
Employers and employees are going to get stuck on, what if they can't move forward? We can't agree on what that return to work is going to look like. What do you do in that case? I mean, I'll put that both to Teresa and Amanda. Like, what do you do? Like, this is going to be something I think you run into more often than you'd like to. How do we get past it? What are some tricks or what are some ways we can get past that?
Yeah, and I think Teresa will have a lot of thoughts on this. I know for us, like the big thing I always remind employers is plans are not written in stone, right? Same for workers. So it's okay to sit down and have a conversation and say, like, this might work for me. I think this might be okay. And we're not just going to stop the communication there, right? Like we're monitoring that recovery, we're monitoring their return to work, we're keeping the communication open. So if there is a barrier, if there is a change, and I mean some conditions wax and wane, that happens. Um, you have to be flexible and remind yourself that's a fluid plan. So adjustments are probably more the rule than the exception with any type of injury recovery, not just mental health.
Yeah. Teresa, any thoughts on that?
Yes, I definitely agree with everything that Amanda has said. For specifically for WorkSafe BC, you want to make sure that you are documenting and communicating because there are going to be roadblocks, whether it is physical or whether it's mental, where you're getting to a point where you can't go but so far. Especially with mental, there health injuries, there tends to be sometimes some information you as an employer just may not have, but we may have it at WorkSafe BC. So you need to make sure that you're updating the portal with, this is the job that was offered. This is why they said it wouldn't work. This is what we can do. This is why it's not going to work. Because by doing that, the claim owner can look at that information. And if there's anything that you're missing or anything that they can advise on, then they can fill in some of those gaps sometimes. So you want to make sure that you're updating the portal, that you're writing down everything that you're doing, that you're summarizing the conversations so that we are able to help more effectively and more efficiently. Because if we have to have you call us and then we call you and then we phone tag it for a few weeks, and then we try to call the worker and then we try to figure out what's going on, it's going to be harder. So if you just update the portal with all the information of the type of job, what kind of accommodations were offered, why the person said they couldn't. Because also under the return to work obligations for Bill 41, there is no exception for mental health, which means not only do you have to cooperate, the worker needs to collaborate as well. They are not able to unreasonably refuse any work. So if there isn't a good reason for them not to refuse, then if you're making a valid offer, it is something that they need to accept. And if they're unable to accept it, we may have to do more digging to figure out exactly what's going on.
There's a key point, communication, but also documentation, right? Ensuring you got all your documentation there because you, again, as an employer, have a responsibility. But I like that you also said under Bill 41, so does an employee. So that understanding it's got to be clear. I'm going to shift over to Jennifer and Steve. This is the hard one, right? How do employers or even supervisors have those uncomfortable conversations, right? In a respectful way. I mean, we're not, psychologists, we're not counselors, we're not supposed to be. But how do we do that? And we haven't really taught, or maybe we don't have the skills, but maybe guide us a little bit on how to have maybe those tougher conversations in a respectful way with workers.
Gonna rock, paper, scissors for
You go
first,
for it.
or
You might.
okay.
Okay.
What I was just thinking of actually that I think is relative to this question was, while Amanda and Teresa were just speaking, something that I think that is forgotten or not highlighted enough is that the mental health return to work or accommodations can start before someone needs to be away from work. You can start having the conversations with someone. I've noticed a change. I'm just concerned about how you are. Is there anything we can do different? Like, even before the person needs to put in a claim, or they can put in the claim and still have that assistance, but it's creating the pathway to have any conversation is with the inquiry. Like, it's just the care and concern, expressing, I noticed change, I'd like to know how you're doing, I'm here if you'd like to talk, like just opening that pathway. People talk about the open door. The people know my door is always open. Yeah, okay, but it's really hard to walk through that door. So sometimes a supervisor needs to go to the worker, or even a colleague maybe needs to go and shoulder to shoulder with their peer, like, hey, I've noticed change, but concerned, have you ever thought of talking to Steve, your supervisor, whoever, sorry, Steve. So that's just a piece that I wanted to offer to this portion, that the conversation sometimes feels more challenging when it feels like there's more of a crisis happening for the worker. So if you can have the conversation before it kind of gets to that place, all of the conversations become a little less intimidating. I'll use my word.
Yeah, no, great. I agree. Steve, your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, this kind of, Jennifer, what you remind me of is like this. Years ago, I had a boss, and he would, he was the big boss, right?
Years ago.
Kind of young, years ago, 1,000 years ago, and he would walk around the office every morning, and he was the CEO, right? And it was a national company, and he would walk around every morning, and no matter who it was, he would spend a minute just saying, "How you doing? What are you working on?" And he would just touch base. He would get to know people. So he would create a baseline for who they are, so that when something did come up, he wasn't this big, scary guy, right? And so I think that's, first of all, if we want to be good at communicating with the people on our team, we actually have to spend time communicating with them. If all you're doing is waiting till the hammer drops or an issue comes along, that sets up a bad precedent, because we want to be able to speak to people in a way that they can hear it. And fear and intimidation closes the ears, right? I think it's important when you're going to these conversations is, first of all, because it can be kind of nerve-wracking. Most supervisors, people leaders, they don't particularly enjoy these conversations either, if they've ever even been taught how to do it, or we've learned from the wrong people how to do it, and it always goes off the rail. So be prepared. Like, what's the issue, right? Be pretty crystal clear from your perspective, and what are you hoping for? And again, I think looking at a positive outcome, we want to go in there with that kind of open mind, right? The last thing we want to do is make assumptions about what we think is going on until we've checked it out. Again, being that, saying it so people can hear it. We want to be direct, right? We don't want to use confusing language. We want to be respectful, and importantly, we don't want to avoid, right? Problems never go away when we avoid them, right? They just turn into bigger things, and and then they turn into those issues that you have to deal with at 4:55 on a Friday afternoon. I think it's important to keep in mind, we all have two ears and one mouth. So nature's just saying, hey, shut up and listen more than you talk, right? Because if I'm boviating like I am right now, I'm not going to hear anybody. What are the, kind of think about what are the positive outcomes, be collaborative with that individual. Because again, if they're not part of the solution, it's not going to be very effective. I think we've talked about emotional intelligence. These conversations can be kind of tricky, not just squishy, but they can be sometimes difficult. So we got to kind of, cool our own jets, maintain our professionalism and understand why we're there, and then importantly, always follow up. These conversations, I mean, they're never a one and done. And if you just kind of think, all I have to do is have one chat and that's it, that's not going to work, right? It's an ongoing engagement with people that we have to do. But yeah, it's not an easy thing to do. But again, like I think with everything we talk about, I mean, there's skills that can be taught.
I think the key critical part there is the follow-up and the follow-through, right? It's not one and done. It's really important that that is seen as an ongoing conversation. And I liked where you were going with it, Steve, where, checking your emotions, making sure you're ready to have that conversation. Kind of what are you hoping to get out of that? Setting your mindset focused on that, but not letting your emotions take over the conversation.
Well, and I'd
Listening.
even go on further, like, make sure you give yourself enough time, right? Am I just leading a high pressure meeting? Do I have a high pressure meeting coming up? Have I slept well? Have I eaten? Do I need to pee, right? Those things that might seem trivial can absolutely derail a tricky conversation.
Yeah. Don't go in hangry. Grab that Snickers bar.
Yeah.
Right.
Don't be
Yeah.
Steve Buscemi.
Well,
Steve.
just to like really quickly tag on to that, you have to remember that when someone is working through something with their mental health, their brain is hardwired to be hypervigilance for rejection and dismissal. And so if any of those things are distracting you, you are already going to trigger defensiveness or resistance from the person you're trying to express care and concern to. So it's true, yeah, if you have to pee, it's a bit distracting, but the person across from you will read it. And yeah, there's actually a really great handout from Canadian Mental Health Association. It's a 5-phase how to have a conversation, and it includes the prep and even how to take care of yourself afterwards, because you don't know what the worker may answer you when you say, hey, how's it going? Is everything okay? How can I help? They may have some really big thing going on that you didn't expect to hear, and so you want to make sure you have care for you after as well. So it's just I don't have a quick link for you, but the Canadian Mental Health Association does have this really great five-step conversation formula.
Good. Thank you for sharing that, Jennifer, and thanks, panelists. I'm going to need to switch to some of our questions from our audience today. And so I'm going to be mindful of time. We've got about 10 minutes, so we're going to go as fast as we can to kind of cover as many of these we can, but being mindful of obviously the answers that you're giving. So general mental health return to work question coming in. What coping mechanisms can help handle the emotional impact of returning back to work? It's open for anyone that wants to jump on that.
I can take a stab.
Sure.
So I'll speak from personal experience. In my career, I did need to take some time off for a mental health injury that was related to things that happened for me at work. And so part of what was helping me return to work was seeking professional support, and that looked like a village at the time. It was a counselor, my GP, a naturopath, like all kinds of helpers. And so through that, I was learning self-awareness, coping mechanisms about reducing anxiety before scenarios which were anxiety triggering and things. So hopefully someone who's been off is getting the care and support from professionals that will get them well enough to feel they can come back to the workplace. So those coping mechanisms may come with them. And then there is just really helping them feel they have autonomy or some control over the narrative, over the experience when they come back to work. Amanda, sorry, I work for an Amanda, so I get it all tongue twisted. Amanda and Teresa have already really touched on this a lot about, asking the worker, what about coming back is difficult? What about being in the workplace is hard? And just giving them the opportunity to share and express, and then get creative and work with them, knowing that they have the ability to put their hand up to say, that thing I asked for didn't work, I'd like to change it. Or I really can't sit next to Jennifer anymore, I need to change it. Like, leaving that openness and knowing that they can ask. So it's not quite a coping mechanism, but it is definitely a tool that will help them with their return to work. And then I'll top out and let the others who know better than me speak.
That was fantastic. I think, when somebody's returning to work as well, particularly with a mental health related issue, we don't want to make the assumption that everything's better, like they're completely like cured. And cured isn't the word that we typically use anyway, but we can still assume that there probably is some level of, some symptoms still existing, right? So, very common with a lot of mental health issues to have, poor concentration, memory problems, there's the feelings that we have, there could be fatigue and all those kind of things. It can take a while for that treatment to have to really kind of make those symptoms go away. So some people will still come back with some symptomology, right? And so we want to just be mindful of that piece as well. And I think and some folks will want to come back maybe a little too prematurely, right? Or so I think as people leaders, we want to be watching, how is this person doing when they're showing up? They want to come back full time, like okay, but is that the best route, right? How are we going to pay attention to this person to make sure that we're setting everybody up for success, right? Because it's not just, hey, I've had time off and now I'm completely fantastic. It doesn't usually work that way. We want to pay attention to people.
Yeah, I think that's a great point, right? There is going to be that linger. It's not going to be perfect on day one. And what kind of accommodations do we have in place to support that worker so that they don't re-injure themselves, right? That's the big part.
I just want to add in there because it was something I wanted to touch on too, and that's kind of like it's just bringing it up here for me is another thing that should really be considered and is successful a lot of times when it is a mental health claim is a graduated reentry. So we're talking about, the different accommodations we can make and what happen if if a plan doesn't work, and the key is be flexible, but the two other options to consider, specifically if it's a WCB claim, is a graduated entry where, and it can be modified duties, it can be regular duties, like they're quite flexible. But a worker returns at maybe, 2 hours of their regular work week, and it could be alternate days. So there's a lot of flexibility with a GRTW to play with the tasks, to play with the accommodations, to play with the hours, the demands that are going on, so that they can build that tolerance, that resilience on their return, some confidence in their abilities to cope with those things. And it also gives you you're a little more involved in that return so that you can make those adjustments as needed, kind of from a higher level, assisting with things. And then the other thing to consider as well is the supernumerary role. So a lot of the time, probably in manufacturing industry, there's safety concerns, right? Somebody comes back, what if they
Right.
what if they have an anxiety attack and they're operating this dangerous machine or something? So having somebody come back supernumerary means they're there as an extra person. So if they are having struggles, if they are, they do need to step away for a minute or go for a walk or take a break, you can still get your operations done because your regular staff is there, everything is filled, and it gives them a little bit more flexibility to take a step back or change things if they're struggling with something.
A lot of great information there. Thanks, everyone. I'm going to try to get a couple more questions in if I can. On the return to work, how do the provisions of Bill 41 redefine the extent of an employer's responsibility in supporting an employee's mental health, and where should that line be drawn between organizational duty and personal accountability? It's a big one. It's a loaded one.
I I'll take a stab at that one.
Sure.
When it comes to Bill 41, you want to look at all the components. As employers, sometimes the legislation can get ahead of us, but we want to think about what is your duty to cooperate and your duty to maintain employment. So are you reaching out and are you collaborating? The intention of Bill 41 is to encourage collaboration to put return to work where it belongs, with the employer and with the worker, and not with WorkSafe BC. We find that employers were waiting for us to say, go ahead, put them back to work, or waiting for a doctor to say, go ahead, put them back to work. So we wanted to stop that. When you talk about the duty to cooperate and having that first moment practicable conversation, that's actually before it's a claim. So we want to start talking to people before it's a claim, finding out where they are, finding out what we can do to support, to keep them attached to the workplace, so that they're not necessarily out for long periods of time. Because the longer a person is out, the less likely they are to return. And when it comes down to mental health claims, they're very expensive claims. They're very expensive claims, and we can get ahead of them, and we haven't been. And a lot of it is due to the stigma, or it's because we haven't really followed any particular protocol. So I would just start with the reaching out to people and having conversations, setting your disability culture so they know what to expect before an injury even happens. And then just working with that person to keep them attached to the workplace. And if they can't be, that's absolutely fine. But checking in with them later when they may be able to.
Yeah, thank you. Lots of great questions coming in. I'm going to try another one here. Mental health, general mental health. What tips to approach males involving mental health? Find it's more difficult to get males to talk about mental health issues. Geez, this is statistical, right? So I'll throw that out to the mental health professionals.
Should a male take a stab at it? Because
Oh,
Go
boy.
ahead, Steve, it's all yours.
I don't know how open I am. I mean, again, I think there is, we want to keep in mind that we don't want to make broad generalizations that all men struggle with talking about this. I mean, that's certainly not true. But yeah, I mean, I think there are a pretty significant segment of folks out there who haven't been socialized to talk about this stuff. It makes people feel vulnerable. They might not even really have the language or the words to describe how they're feeling. So I'm just a big believer. And I think, Jennifer mentioned it before, is, if we're going to go in and start having this conversation, we need to have a rapport or a pre-established relationship to begin with. If I'm going up to somebody who's never met me before, and I'm the boss, and I start talking about their mental health, it might be a little bit, whoa, back off a little bit. So we just kind of start talking, we get to know each other first. I think a really helpful way to we want to create a climate. I think that's really important. So, do those awareness courses, get people aware of mental health issues. Once you get them in a group talking about the issues, and then having these kind of, have toolbox talks in team meetings, raise it. If I train people, what I always encourage them to do is the next time you meet with your team, just go and say, hey, you know what? The other day I went to some training around mental health in the workplace, and this is what I learned. That raises the temperature in a comfortable way to make people think, oh, okay, this isn't such a big, scary thing. And if we do it like that, we create these safe conditions, then people are more likely to be open to talking, right? I mean, it's relationship and safety that we're trying to create here. And again, the foundation has to be laid before we expect somebody just to say, hey, guess what? I'm struggling.
Yeah. Any final thoughts there, Jennifer, on that?
It's real base, like absolutely everything Steve said, I 100% agree with. And the only addition I would make is everyone feels mad, sad, or glad. Real simple, basic, emotional experiences. And so the rapport absolutely has to be there. You can't just cold like, hey, are you feeling mad? Like that, like this probably likely not going to be a favorable response to that. Thinking it to my experiences in again municipal government and some of the really serious incidents I've been to, and really reading incorrectly the emotional moment for the foreperson and leadership on the site. Being okay to be wrong is also a really important experience. Like, hey, sorry, you tell me then what are you feeling? Like I read that wrong, and you tell me, and just get them talking can be very, very powerful. And again, it's that autonomy or that empowerment for the other person, that you're here for them to feel seen, heard, and attended to.
Well, we need more time, and I want to, again, thank you all, Teresa, Jennifer, Amanda, and Steve for joining us today. It just there's so much more we could dig into and provide for our members and listeners, and I know we'll come back with another webinar soon. But there's a lot of questions that obviously were submitted we didn't get to. We're going to make available to the panelists so that they can get those responses back, so that those folks get some answers to their questions. They're all very important to us. All right, I'm going to go into a bit of a little, self-promotion of the organization. Please save your seats. Make It Safe Vancouver Island and Make It Safe Okanagan have opened up in Nanaimo, March 13th, and in Kelowna, April 10th. So don't miss the chance to connect with your local safety community in your region, learn together in expert sessions and workshops, and take the best practice with that and take it back to your work. You all can save this week with the early bird group discounts. So please do check it out. Visits our website at makeitsafe.ca. Alongside those events, we do adding in a couple special things, as we do always, to continue to add to the learning available to our members. In Nanaimo on March 14th, join us for a one-day 5S training certificate class. Again, slip, strips, falls. If we just learn the basics of 5S, we could really make a massive improvement in our workplaces by utilizing 5S training. Lean Six Sigma Black Belt instructor will be joining us, providing that for you. And more dates on that for Kelowna and Vancouver will be coming soon. In Kelowna, April 9th and 10th, save your seats for the two-day dust hazard analysis course. Again, bringing it back because, as we know, the legislation is changing here in 2025. Be compliant, be knowledgeable. So the combustible dust regulations will certainly be impacted coming forward. And so we've got this course coming again for Kelowna and for Make It Safe Vancouver. And again, there are still time to submit your nominations for the 2025 Safety Excellence Awards. Again, celebrate excellence in your organization around safety, your colleagues, your executive leadership, your company, even your joint health and safety committee, all working towards a better and healthier, safe environment for your workplaces. So nominate those leaders today. And last announcement, in February 28th, you can save 20% when you book any of your 2025 private group training with your team. We've got a lot of great courses, great instructors. Please reach out to us and book your training and take advantage of these savings. Again, I want to make mention that we do have our safety team available to you. We put on these webinars and put out these resources for you to help you in improving your safety within your organization. Watch for an email tomorrow with a link and the recording to today's session. A survey link will be great to give us your feedback and let us know what else you'd like to see, how we can make it better, and make sure that our topics are relevant to all of you. And as I leave, I just want to say thank you again to our panelists. It was great to have them on board today. Jennifer and Amanda and Teresa, and of course our own Steve Conway did a great job, and we really appreciate them taking time out of their day to share with all of you. So again, don't forget the survey and feedback to us, and we look forward to seeing you next time at our Manufacturing Safety Alliance webinar. Thanks and have a great day.